All right, welcome in everyone. We are going to give everyone just a few minutes to log in, and then we will get started with our author visit with Rory Power. So just be a little bit patient while we let everybody join from the waiting room. We're right at 4:01, so we'll give everybody a couple minutes just to get through that login. All right, as we wait just for those last couple to go ahead and log in, just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping for our event today. Our event's going to take just about an hour, and we are going to have time at the end for questions with our author. All right, and it looks like our waiting room has slowed down, so we will go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to this virtual author visit here at the Lincoln Public Library. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kathryn Hunt, and I am the director of the Lincoln Public Library. And I am delighted to have this event today. And today we are speaking with Rory Power, who is a fantastic writer of books for adults and young adults, including Wilder Girls, Burn Our Bodies Down, and more. Wilder Girls is one of our Battle of the Book selections for this year's Battle of the Books competition, which is a trivia competition for young adults at our library. And we are so delighted to have some time to speak with Rory Power today. One of the things that we are also grateful for is the support of our friends at the library who have provided two of Rory's books that we will be doing a drawing to give away after the event. So if you are one of the lucky winners of those books, you'll get an email from us after the event. We won't be announcing it live just to make sure that we have everybody who attended, not just the people who came in at the beginning or just at the end. And so with that, Rory, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I apologize to you about this already. I should just give a blanket warning to everybody. My cat is currently going through it. I don't know what's happening in her brain, probably nothing. But she's like doing a sprint under the table that I'm sitting at. So if you, if the screen shakes, that's her. I'll see if I can scoop her and, you know, as we said, pay the cat tax, but we'll see. Oh boy, she's making noises.
We'd love to see her if she decides to share her presence with us, but if not,
This might be a private thing that she's going through, but we'll see. She's capricious. You never know.
but yeah, so any of that background noise, that is your precious cat. Can
That's
we know the
her.
cat's name?
Her name is Scallion, like the vegetable. She's a little bit spicy as fitting. So she's a good.
Fantastic. Well, we all say hello to Scallion and
I'll
we
pass
hope
it
she'll
on. Yeah.
behave, but she's a cat, so of course there's no guarantees. Fantastic. Well, Rory, can to get started, I'd love to talk a little bit about kind of your experience as a writer, and if you can tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming an author.
Yeah. I like a lot of writers. I like loved writing from when I was very, very small. I think my first book, using the word generously, I was like 4 or 5, and I wrote Detective Pony, and then the sequel, Detective Pony Finds the Diamonds, which you didn't really need to read the whole thing because the plot is right there in the title. But I loved it, and I also grew up in a house with a lot of like my mom was an English literature professor, and so she really like taught me from the beginning how much or really how to love story and to cherish specifically the written word. Like I love TV, I love movies, I watch them. There's always something playing when I was going to say alone, but no, even if someone else is there, I will put something on TV. But like there's something really special about the written word and the way what you can do with language. So she really helped instill that in me. Um, but I kind of stopped writing for a while in about high school and in college. I think I just kind of wanted to try other stuff, see what else was out there. And I did like about 2 years as an editorial assistant in publishing. So I was working on other people's books because I was like, I think I do want to do something with books, but I don't want to write them. I'm scared. So I thought I would work on other people's. And it was a wonderful job. I learned a lot, but I also did a lot of writing in Google Docs when I was not supposed to be doing that. So I thought, you know what, let me take this seriously and try and give it a go. And so I kind of came back to it after a little bit of time testing the waters elsewhere.
That's one. I really want to know what Detective Pony was, what mystery Detective Pony was solving in the original. The
Me
second one,
too. I
obviously, for
can't
finding
remember.
diamonds. But well, if you ever find it, please send me an email. I'd love to know. Um,
Absolutely.
but one of the things you said that I think is really interesting is you said, like you went into editing because actually writing felt kind of scary. And
Mhm.
I think that that's a familiar feeling. And it's interesting when we look when we're young, we don't necessarily think of it that way. We write stories, we do things. I was wondering if you talk a little bit about kind of, if you what it was that was frightening about kind of like writing your own stories and kind of how you've handled that as you
Yeah.
obviously have as you've moved into creating your own work.
I think the older I got and the more I read and the more um, narrative I saw in television, the more I understood how a story worked. It seemed that I could understand better how easy it was for it to not work and how easy it was for me to try something and not not accomplish it. And I think so I think some of it was I don't know if that's I don't call myself a perfectionist because I can't count the number of times I've been like good enough, whatever. But I there's some element of that there of like it could go wrong, so why don't I just not do it? Um and I think I did have to kind of trick myself into being okay with that. So I started out when I first started writing, I don't do this as much anymore just for like efficiency's sake. But when I first started, I would sometimes I would write in like an email to myself or in my notes app or just something that wasn't like Microsoft Word, just so it felt a little bit like I was like hiding. Like, oh, it's not real. It's just an email. It's fine. Or if I was writing in Microsoft Word or something like that, if I didn't like what I was doing, like if I thought the prose was bad or something like that, I would put it in bold as like a sign to myself, like, oh, come back to this. You don't like it very much. And then if I really didn't like what I was doing, I would put it also in all caps. Um, the problem was that everything, it would be a whole draft in bold and all caps, which is a real pain to turn back. Like bold is fine, but you have to set up like a whole thing to turn it back to regular lowercase. And then like the word I, that does it, it's a whole mess. So I have stopped doing that just to spare me the step of undoing it. But just like those little tricks, I think like changing text color could work. I know some people do it with fonts too. They write in a different font and it kind of like convinces you that this isn't like the real thing, which it is, but still. Um, so I kind of had to like take it in stages, almost like walking backwards into it to be like, it's not really there. Um, and then, you get used to it and you learn that like, no, there is actually, you will have time to fix the things that you don't like. And there's no way that you won't like, wait, hold on, too many negatives in the sentence. There's no way to write something that you 100% love on the first go, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that's really interesting. I've heard that too, that apparently Comic Sans is really
Yeah.
good to write your first draft in because no one can take anything in Comic Sans seriously. Um, but I think that's interesting because especially, for those of us who are avid readers, which I think most writers are, you spend so much time with people's finished products, and then you
Hmm.
have to start with your first draft. And the gulf between those
It's
is often
huge.
big. And until you do it a few times to see how your draft ends to your finished product.
Mhm.
I wonder if you can talk about a little, like you talked a little bit about, having to go through and do that, but how does editing work for you?
Um, it's I mean it's different every time, obviously, but on a general level, I the with my young adult stuff specifically, because I have these two adult books, but they're written in a very different voice and kind of like they felt like they were using a different muscle group for me. And so with the stuff that I do, like more on the regular with the young adult stuff, the way that I have found that I revise most, I won't say efficiently, I don't think it's efficient, but it's the most exciting to me is to kind of start from scratch every time. Almost like the first draft is like putting all the pieces on the table and then going, okay, what if they went together like this, or what if they went together like that? And I think some of that is it helps keep it like new and exciting for me. And I think I just learn a lot about the story as I write, and there will be things that are in the final draft that you can only see like a glimpse of in the first draft, but I had to put them there so that I could then look at them and be like, okay, well, what is this? Like, how does it work? So I know I have a couple writer friends who they're very linear with their process and like what once it's there, it's more about like polishing and smoothing it out. And I often describe my process as like you build a house and then you pick the house up and you move it over and then you pick the house up and you like and eventually we'll end up like pretty much where it was, but like a few inches over and it looks different.
So it sounds like outlining and things like that aren't a huge part of your process.
Not a reliable one. I'll make like a very, very broad outline, like a beginning, middle, end kind of thing, and those generally stay the same. But as far as how they connect, I've learned that like I can outline it and then it stops being like the part of my brain that's like, okay, now we have to write it does not exist. Like that is writing it to me. So I have to be like, no, 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 it's a mystery. You have to write it to find out.
What's one of the biggest surprises in your books? Obviously, we might be getting into spoiler territory, so if so,
Sure.
feel free to be vague. But I'm interested, like, what's one of the biggest surprises in one of your books that has come out of this process that you didn't see when you started the
Yeah.
first draft?
Um, oh, okay, there's two, I think, and one is from my book that's going to come out in June. There is there is a reveal at the end of the book that I didn't know was going to happen until I wrote it. And like I knew subconsciously like the trail was there, but I hadn't realized that I had been putting it there until I got to the end and was like, "Oh, well, obviously that's what happens." That's very, very vague. Um, I think the one from my published stuff that I would go to is at the end of Burn Our Bodies Down, there's um a scene where the main character, something horrible has just happened to her, and she kind of wakes up somewhere that she would not have expected to be. And it was kind of a culmination of like a lot of images that I had been playing with and like thematic stuff. And I love making a metaphor literal. Like that's my favorite thing. And I just found a way to do it that was so satisfying to me. But I don't think I would have gotten there if I hadn't kind of like put in the layers almost of like, here's here's the basic plot of the book, but then here's another image and here's another piece, and then it's very cumulative, I think, for me.
That's, that's fantastic, and that's really fascinating. And I feel like that really has to lead two elements in your books feeling very organic as opposed to feeling like, oh, and then we've put this breadcrumb here because we knew we had to get to this end result. You know, if you're kind of
Yeah,
building it up the same way we're going to uncover it as we go with you
that's the
through your
hope.
novel.
I do sometimes in a draft, like my editor will make a note that's like, what? Like, how did this get here? And I'm like, oh, right, you weren't with me for the like six rounds that I did in my head. Okay, hold on. Let me explain.
And that's the value of editors. That's why
Exactly.
that's the value that they add. Um, I like what you said about making metaphors literal, and it was also reminding me of some of the things I've seen in your other interviews, but also the way you were talking about being really interested in story across different media, including
Mm.
visual media. Because I understand that you're quite a visual thinker as you think through your books. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I am not like an artistic person. Like I can't make the thing, but I get so much inspiration from visual media. So from photographers, from artists, from sculpture work, from like light installations, from architecture. Um, and I often start with an image or see very specific, almost like frames or stills from a movie that kind of encapsulate the vibe that I want the book to have or the atmosphere. Um, so like for the book that I have that's coming out in June, I saw this one photograph by a photographer called Neil Krug, and it just told the whole thing to me completely. And for my second book, Burn Our Bodies Down, was the same way. There was a photograph, and I actually, that photographer, we connected on Instagram, and I sent her my book, and she sent me a print of her photograph. Um, but yeah, I just love the element of like translation that happens between art forms and the way that something visual can feel so specific, but in a way that I can only express with words. Yeah, and there's just such a breadth too of material out there, and people are doing such incredible things. Like before I started writing, I did not know, but there's this thing called land art that people do where like there will be, in a forest, you could like go and tie string around different tree trunks at different heights. And then if you stand in one spot, it will create like a picture or an illusion of something. And I just think that's incredible. And I got to write about it.
And I think that's such a fascinating tension with what you're talking about translating those images into words, because
Mm,
of course, when we read, we then create our own visual images
yeah.
as readers, which is, of course, one of the great debates whenever then books get adapted into
Yeah.
visual media is, where does it map, where does it not map onto kind of the personal images that we've made? So I think that's a
Mm,
really interesting tension that you're moving back and forth through with that. Um, Moving a little bit to Wilder Girls in
yeah.
specific, how would you, just in case we have people on who haven't read it, how would you
Oh,
describe
sure.
Wilder Girls?
So I always call it kind of I was about to say Lord of the Rings. It's not like Lord of the Rings at all, but it is like Lord of the Flies. Um, and kind of Lord of the Flies crossed with Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, which is an adult book. Um, it's also a movie. It's very good. I loved the book and the movie. But it's about a boarding school, an all-girls boarding school on an island off the coast of Maine. And at the start of the book, they've been under quarantine for, I'm gonna say 18 months. I'm gonna hope that that's right. It might be longer. Um, because something mysterious has been going wrong with them. They're all ill in different weird ways, and the main character has to kind of figure out what's going on, but more specifically, where her best friend is when her best friend goes missing. Yes, that's it.
Fantastic. Yes, it's a fantastic novel.
Thank you.
And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit where you got, not just where you got the idea for it, but kind of like how this formed. It's always
Yeah.
interesting, is it setting? Is it character? Is it the twist of the missing friend? Like kind of as you started building this house in that first draft, how did you, what laid the foundation for it?
It was for Wilder Girls, it was setting, and it often is for me. I think it's that visual aspect again that I often I talk about this with a friend of mine, Jennifer Dugan, who writes amazing young adult novels, but also adult novels that are contemporary and like rom-coms, romance. And she's so character focused. That's where she starts. And we both like can't grasp the other person's process because I think about it more like, the little yellow guy in Google Maps that you like put down for Street View. And the way I think about character is like, who do I have to make be the guy so that I can look at the stuff that I want to look at? Um, and the stuff that I wanted to look at for Wilder Girls was this island. And when I was a senior in college, I want to say, maybe the year after, I went to stay with a friend and at her like family's house, I think. And it was on an island off the coast of North Carolina called Harker's Island. And I'm from New England. I am like a woods girl. And I just had never been there before. And it was such a different landscape to me. And it just really caught my attention. And on the way on the flight home, I like drew a little sketch of the island and was like, I don't know what this is because I wasn't writing at the time, but I knew I was going to use it somehow. Um, and it really just kind of went from there. Like, what is the who do I have to be on this island? Um, and I've always loved work that focuses on characters or people who are like not trapped, but in this really insular community. And like when there are constraints put on a story, I think that's so interesting. So it seems like the most fun thing I could do would be like they're on an island and they can't leave. And also like they're in this little society almost that has very specific rules and a context that isn't just we're people who are living here. It's we're students and we're at school, even if school is a little bit messed up.
Well, and I do think that's interesting with kind of constraints, and especially with kind
Mhm.
of like geographic isolation, where your characters can't have their problems solved just by reaching out to outside sources,
Mhm.
kind of getting to get in with them. So this experience on Harker's Island kind of helped inspire the place.
Yeah.
What kind of helped inspire your characters? Do they have people or aspects of you, of people you know? Are they just fully emerged, fully formed to be this yellow person in Google Maps to explore this island? Like, kind of how do you build? Because they are very complicated, very dynamic
Mhm.
characters. I'm interested in kind of how you built
Thank
them
you.
up.
I think, well, they all have parts of me because like they all came out of my head. It would be, I think, impossible for someone to really truly like create a person in a vacuum almost. So even the ones where as I wrote them, I was like, this is just a random person, I can go back and be like, oh, that part is me. So there's some of me in all of them. Hetty, the narrator of the book, she's honestly, I was gonna say she's almost the most like invisible of the three main characters. And she was that way to me when writing because so much of what's important about her is kind of the way that she goes from really observing and being more of a passive presence to an active presence for better and often for worse. Um, but I think she kind of evolved out of like um, what's the word I'm looking for? What I needed for the narrative. So I think she was kind of a functional creation for me at first. Um, Reese was really, I mean, she's a bad boy with a heart of gold, but she's a lesbian. So that was just kind of a fun, like, what happens if I take the boy on a motorcycle and just make it a girl with like glow in the dark hair? I think that'd be really cool. Um, and then she, took off. But Wyatt has always been like they're all my favorite, but like she's my favorite. Um, and I have always loved unreliable characters, narrators, and otherwise in fiction. And at the time I was writing, this would have been like 2015, maybe you Gone Girl, the book, and then the movie came out, and there were all these pieces about Gone Girl being like, this movie is anti-feminist actually because Amy Dunn, the main character, does bad things. And it's anti-feminist for a woman to do bad things. And I was like, that, no, I think it's feminist actually for a woman to be horrible. So Violet was kind of my version of that. I don't think she's horrible. I love her, but what it like she was a character, a way for me to kind of lean into that and work with someone who was a little less cut and dry, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, that is always an interesting debate because, of course, it is fiction. So, we can have characters do things we wouldn't want people that we know to do.
Yeah.
Um, so, with talking about character, I think this is a good place to pivot into a couple of our questions from our attendees, which we have quite a few of. And again,
Yeah.
if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. We'll get through as many of them as we can, but I think probably start with some of those at this point. But we did have a question about whether, we talked a little bit about outlining plot, things
Mhm.
like that, whether you kind of outline anything about your characters at the beginning.
I should, honestly, I should. It would probably save me some heartache when I get to like the two-thirds point of a book and I'm like, oh my God, she's been 15 different people across this whole book. But I don't tend to do that the way I know some writers get a lot out of like kind of filling out information about their character before they start working with them. So like whether that's a profile or just like journaling in the character's voice. For me, stuff like that can kind of take the discovery and like the excitement out of it for me. I find it very difficult to like really focus on what I'm doing if I'm not finding new things. Um, So I tend to go into it with very little information in my head, and I'll kind of add to the character as I go. And then once I get to like maybe the halfway point, maybe the end, look back at what I have and go, okay, wait, did I just add this detail because I needed it for one scene? And do I need to keep it, or like can I incorporate it more fully into the character? Stuff like that. But especially in that first draft, it's really like a tool belt where like I need the character to do this. What kind of person does she have to be? How am I going to go with that?
Fantastic. And then you're kind of exploring with them what
Yeah,
they
yeah. And
do.
sometimes I hit a dead end and it's like, oh, that's not who that is at all. But that's okay. Like, that just goes in a different document and I pivot.
That's fantastic. So moving a little bit away from character, just kind of looking through our questions on Wilder Girls. So we did have some questions about the illness that we have
Mhm.
going on in the book, the talks, and we have somebody who's asking about your choice to depict the effects of the talks so vividly with the girls. And can you talk a little bit about your choice and kind of developing that and describing it and the fact that it has different impacts on different characters in the book?
Yeah. Um, some of the illness affects all the girls differently. There is kind of a common thread in that everything that happens to the girls is based off in some way an evolution that is present in animals or in nature. So stuff like a third eyelid, like you see in cats. I say as my cat sprints across the room. Um, so they all come from that kind of core of like adaptive and improving. The girls, but I wanted it to be different for each one because I mean, A, that was more exciting as a writer to be able to do more stuff, but also because I liked the way it kind of reflected the different personalities of the girls. And I don't think it's like a one-to-one, this girl is mean, so she gets a crab shell and she, like, but it kind of lent itself, I think, to the vibe I wanted the book to have. That's like, yes, there's like weird stuff going on and there's like science and there are answers, but there's also just kind of like almost like a dreamy quality to it sometimes, or I hope that there is. Um, and I think that kind of helps create that. In terms of the vividness, I just thought it was like fun and gross and like that is how big and how scary and painful things felt to me when I was 16, 17. And that's how it felt like to be a kid one day and then an adult, but also like people who don't know me are looking at me and as an adult, but I'm still expected to be in the role of a child and like that kind of betweenness and confusion. That's such a big feeling that I wanted the whole book to kind of meet that feeling there, and be really extreme.
Absolutely. And that kind of intensity
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
adolescence and early adulthood. And I think that's really interesting is kind of looking at that as kind of a discussion of adolescence and puberty and the fact that there
Hmm.
are physical ways that we move through the world differently. But then um, your right after you published this book the next year, we had a
Yeah.
massive quarantine.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that's really changed the way people have kind of interpreted and approached your book in ways that I'm
Uh,
assuming you weren't expecting unless you had a secret
no.
read on 2020. The rest of us didn't.
I was worried it would. I was worried that that suddenly it would be that that was what the book was about and it would be really interpreted through that lens. If it was, nobody told me, so that's great. Like that's all good. I don't know that I've noticed a huge difference in the way that people relate to it. I know like in 2020 there was that while where like Contagion was the most popular movie on Netflix or something. And I think there was a bit of that where it's like relatable, but also not at all because nobody is like spreading gills and stuff. Um, so I think there was an appeal there of like it's reality, but it's also not at all, and that's kind of a safer space to be in. Um, but yeah, it was quarantine was really not a word we used that much in 2019, and then yeah, things changed.
You got on that kind of cultural movement right before. Um, Another one of the questions we have is there a part of Wilder Girls that you changed, whether through your writing process, through the editing process, um, that now looking back, you regret changing and kind of wish that you'd kept going through?
Um, I don't know. There's definitely stuff that like if I read it again, I would change. I'm sure. I haven't read it in full in a long time now, like maybe since it came out. And part of that is because I know that if I looked at it again, I'd be like, oh well, I would do that. Like I would write that differently. And that's good as far as I'm concerned. That means that I'm a different writer than I was then, which is good because that's the whole point. I want to grow, I want to learn, I want to evolve. But as far as something I changed and then wish I changed back, I'm not sure anything comes to mind. Kind of the opposite. Like I did at one point toy with making the ending more closed. And I wasn't really sure. And I asked my editor, and she was like, "You should do what you want to do." And I was like, "Great, thank you so much. That's super helpful." But I ended up leaving it as it is, and not everybody will agree with me, but I'm glad that I did. It has the feeling that I wanted it to have. So um, I did toy with changing it, but eventually we kept it the way it was.
Well, and I guess with that, maybe not just with Wilder Girls that does have that ambiguous ending, but with your books in general, do you have the story continuing on in your mind, or do you kind of leave it at the end, where you leave us as readers?
Kind of, kind of both. I think I've said before that like I don't really have an idea of what happens next in Wilder Girls, and like that is true in the sense that I have a feeling of like what I think probably would have happened if I'd kept writing for a few pages, but I chose to stop it where I did. So my feeling is that like my opinion of what might happen is as valid and as supported as anybody else's. So like I know ish, but I don't use know in a like certain way. It's just what I think maybe likely would have happened. But everybody has the same data that I do. So
We haven't walked with those. You haven't walked with those characters either through that to see where
Yeah,
we
yeah.
end up. Switching a little bit to talk a little bit about you and your writing process in a little bit. We do have a question of, and favorite I know is a loaded answer, but who are some of your favorite authors? We don't have to
hmm
pick a favorite, but yeah, who are some of your favorite authors? Who would you
Um,
share?
well, I love Jeff Vandermeer. I mentioned one of my favorite things about his work is that he's been writing for like decades now. He's done pretty much everything. Like he really has tried anything that he wants to try, and he has like written a book that he's written things as weird as he wants to write them. Um, and I think I find that so admirable. I would love to follow that that model, so to speak. But I also just think his work is really smart and really innovative. I also love Nova Renstuma. I think she's just an incredible writer. Her prose has this rhythm to it that I really love. Rhythm is such a huge thing for me in prose, and I feel like sometimes you can notice when, well, hopefully, yes, you can always notice when that is important to someone. And she actually has a new book out in May that I got to read early, and I was so excited about it. It's wonderful. Um, I'm like looking at my shelf now. I feel like, oh, Megan Abbott, I also think is amazing. She has a similar, like, she's one of the people that I read and kind of realized, oh, I can do whatever I want with prose. Like, I can use fragments. I can be a little bit vague. I can do whatever I want if it creates the effect that I want it to create. Um, and I think she also writes really complicated characters, um, not always likable, which is great for me. I love that. And I think she's really amazing as well.
Fantastic. It's really great when you find authors that don't just do work that you think is exciting, but kind of give you permission to do your work
Yeah.
in new ways or in the ways that you really wanted to, but for some reason felt, oh,
Mhm.
that's not how literature is written. Um, um, what does your writing process kind of look like? Do you have a regular schedule? Is it as inspiration hits you? Is it in the notes app, in between other things that you're doing? What does
Yeah.
that process kind of look like just in practical terms?
So I don't believe that every piece of writing advice is going to be true for everybody. So when I say I write every day, that's not going to work for everyone. But if I don't write every day, I will never write again. My tendency toward doing nothing is so strong that like if I take a break that's longer than 18 hours, I'm done. Like I won't work again for at least a couple weeks. I'm just I'm a lazy person. I know this about myself. So I have to write pretty much every day. And I can't write at home. Like if I sit on the couch, it's done forever. So I go to a coffee shop. They don't have Wi-Fi, which is great. It saves me from myself. And I sit there for like 2 or 3 hours pretty much every day and I do my work. I usually have a playlist for whatever I'm working on and I listen to that and that kind of helps like signal to my brain that it's time. You actually do have to pay attention. Um, yeah, and so it fluctuates a little bit. I'm not always the best at keeping to a routine, but that's when it's like when I'm most successful is when I'm at it every day.
Well, and I think that that's really good advice in its own way of you and your writing
hmm
process, and this is the process that helps you be successful. And yeah, not every piece of advice is going to work for everyone, but I think knowing yourself is what allows you to find what advice is going to work for you.
And it's like it's different per project sometimes. Like there was a while where I was like, guys, I've figured it out. I just have to take weekends. Like I just don't work on the weekends. And it worked for about 6 weeks. And then it's like, oh my God, I can't ever do that again. So It depends. Everybody's different, but yeah, if you test some stuff out, I think you'll find something that works.
And do you find that routine's enough to keep you motivated even when writing's hard or when you have mental blocks, or is that kind of where that process then becomes really difficult?
It definitely is hard. I mean, some of the motivation comes from like that's my job, so I gotta pay rent. But some of it is really like I I keep a well, writing journal would be a generous description, but like I keep a spreadsheet that kind of just tracks like when I've gone to work and if I've written words, I'll write down how many, but sometimes I forget. Really, it's just like here are the days that I did stuff. And it helps me kind of remind myself that like no, things are I am moving even if it doesn't always feel like it. So that can help with motivation, but it can also help me point out or like figure out patterns or like, oh, actually, no, I do need to take a day off. And I know that's a dangerous thing, but it's been 3 weeks and like I need a break. Um, so I keep stuff like that to kind of just help me stay oriented in the process. But there's also just, I'm better when I'm busy. Like I feel better. I enjoy the work more if I do it more. And I kind of have to remind myself of that because it's so tempting to just stop if it's getting hard, but like if I stop now, then I have to then I'm in the same place tomorrow. Then I come back to work tomorrow and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm still here." Like if I keep going, at least tomorrow I don't have to write this sentence. So,
I think momentum is such a thing for so many people. I
mhm.
know, again, no advice works for everyone, but I remember a really interesting piece of advice I heard was to always quit in the middle of a scene or even the middle of a sentence.
Yeah.
So at least the next day, well, you know what you're doing. You're finishing the sentence. And it's not, coming up from inertia. You have that
Yeah.
momentum.
Yeah.
Um, so since you mentioned writing playlists,
Mhm.
are there any songs that you associate with Wilder Girls with any of your books that you'd want to share with us?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't listen to this while writing Wilder Girls, but Toxic by Britney Spears is at the top of the playlist now just because it had to be. I love a pun. Um, I think at the time I was listening to a lot of like Haley Kiyoko, a lot of Florence and the Machine. Um, I also, it's not always music that I would like necessarily listen to just hanging out. Like there was one, my Spotify Wrapped is always such a mess because like I will listen to these playlists for hours and hours and hours. And I think it was last year, my top track was like 12-minute didgeridoo rattle. So that was like a fan favorite. Yeah, I think, oh, oh gosh, I'm gonna get it mixed up with a different song, but there's a Mitski song. I want to say Pink Glow, but I feel like that's also a Muna song. I have playlists on my Spotify profile that people can listen to if they want. I
Fantastic.
just once I'm done with the book, I just whack it up there. So
So I have to ask, didgeridoo last year, is that for an upcoming project, a project in the works?
I think that one was a holdover. Like I was doing revisions maybe for one of my adult books, but the not the most recent Halsey album, but the one before, the If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, that dominated my Spotify Wrapped because it really aligns with Kill Creatures, which is the book that I have coming out in June. So
Very nice. And a great album.
a great album. Exactly.
Let's see. We're coming pretty close to the wrap on our time. Um, One of the things that we do have that is something we often ask these events, but also comes from one of our participants. We've
Yeah.
talked a little bit about writing process and all those things, but what advice would you have for aspiring writers?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of really great resources out there. So, like, there is something for everybody. and there's so much more than there used to be. So definitely like be curious for sure. But I think the one that I kind of come back to the most still is to trust your gut as a storyteller, because there are kind of not expectations, but there are things that like readers are looking for or that are really popular. Maybe there's like a trend in TV or in books or whatever. And the thing that I always kind of end up doing is like, I want to write that. That seems really big and exciting. And then I have to think about like, is that the kind of like, is that me? Is that, am I going to be like, maybe I could do it, but am I going to have fun? Am I going to feel like this is what my voice is for? And everybody's different. Like there are people who that is what their voice is for, and vice versa. But yeah, I think I have to kind of, when I'm stuck somewhere, if I'm not sure about what I'm doing on the page, it's taking a beat and being like, how do like, how do I feel about this? Really? If I scrape everything else away, if I don't think about my editor or my agents or my readers, how do I feel? And usually that points me in the right direction.
I think that's an absolutely great piece of advice. And especially speaking as a reader, I think that's a great piece of advice because I think if when writers really tell the stories that are true to
Mhm.
themselves, that allows us to have such a diversity of stories, which then as
Yes.
readers lets us not just find things that reflect our experiences or that we really like, but also encounter totally new things that
Hmm.
wouldn't exist in our brains. But some other person with this creative gift has shared that with
Yeah,
the world.
exactly.
And even if it's not what's trending at the moment. So thank you for that advice. And I think that will, I think that has the potential to enrich the literary world that we all participate in and that, we're here at a library author event because we love it. You mentioned a book upcoming in June. Can you share with us a little bit about what is next for you?
Yes, I actually, oh boy, there's a stack. Hold on. I might be semi-prepared for once in my life. Haha. This is what's next for me. It is a young adult thriller. It comes out in June, in the first week of June. Um, and it's, I've been calling it my reverse Pretty Little Liars book, which I feel like doesn't really make sense. But it's about a girl named Nan, and a year ago, her three best friends disappeared. They like went into the canyon and nobody saw them ever again. And then this year, one of them has reappeared. She's alive, and everybody's like, "That's amazing." And Nan is like, "That's super weird because I definitely like killed you last summer, so I don't know what's going on." And then that's like the first 5 pages. It's not a spoiler. But yeah, then it goes from there. And I had just the best time writing it.
Fantastic. So first week in June that comes out.
Yeah.
So that's just in time for anyone who's watching. If you want to add that to your summer reading list with
Oh
summer
yeah.
reading for the library, we'll be kicking that off the first week in June as well.
Oh,
Um,
hello. Do you want to come apologize for all the noise you made? No, she doesn't.
well, and with that, this is actually the first question we got from an attendee, and I have been holding it till the end. So I thought this was absolutely wonderful, which is all of the other questions were for you, Rory, but this one was for Scallion, which
Scout.
is what is it like to live with a writer?
I mean, I think she has it pretty good personally. She loves a blanket fort, so she just like goes in there and naps all day, and then I come home from writing and I'm super psyched to see her, and she is not psyched to see me. But I leave her alone most of the day because I'm working, so she I think really loves that. And I stay up late with her, which I won't say she loves because she doesn't like me all that much.
She's a cat. She's a cat. I'm sure she loves you. She
We're
just
like we're
can't
like
show
best
it.
friends, but like she would eat me, and that's okay.
That's how it goes sometimes.
Come here. You suck. Get out of here.
Well, brilliant. Well, to all of our attendees, thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for all of your questions. I know we did not get to quite all of them, but I hope that we managed to talk about all of the big topics that you sent questions in on, things like character, things like writing process, things like inspiration. And Rory, thank you so much for your time. We so appreciate having you here and sharing
It's my
your
pleasure.
experience, your book. So, and we wish you all of the luck in June with
Thank
releasing your
you.
next title. I'm sure it will be absolutely fantastic, but we know you'll be busy with all of the promotion of that to make sure that everyone gets their hands on that great story. And with that, again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Rory, again, and everyone, including Scallion. Have an absolutely wonderful evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for coming, everybody.